All right, let's talk Detroit Lions. Look, guys, we are getting close to football returning. The Lions rookies report to camp in just a week or so, July 16th. That means we are getting close to live action. Finally, football is almost back, and there is one under the radar guy, an unheard of addition to this Lions roster that I think people need to pay attention to starting in a week when training camp happens. Exciting addition to the Detroit squad. We'll get to this in just 1 second. But first, I'm Nick. That is Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, the Detroit Lions made a lot of solid draft picks. Not as many big headline moves as they'd made in years past, but it was a pretty solid offseason for Detroit, all things considering. A little bit of volatility with the coaching staff, but I think we all agree they are one of, if not the top team in the NFC as we get ready for the 2025 season. But there's one guy that was unheard of, at least to me, that when you break down the data and break down his information and situation with Detroit, this looks like a great fit and a massive steal potentially for the Lions, and that's wide receiver Jackson Meeks, an undrafted free agent out of Syracuse. I tell you what, folks, even though this kid is undrafted, 6 foot plus, 200 pounds, second highest grade among all receivers according to PFF in the ACC. He looks like a real stud. And when you compare his numbers to some quality wide receivers of a similar kind of body type and productivity element from the NFL draft, he looks really good, especially for an undrafted free agent. Let's pull up this first chart here to highlight what I'm talking about. We're looking at passer rating when targeting Meeks versus similar wide receivers. And I kind of define similar wide receivers. I picked Ted McMillan, Jaden Higgins, and Jalen Royals. You can see them working left to right before Jackson Meeks, again, all the way there on the far right. I picked these guys as similar just because I didn't want to pick and compare Meeks to a 5'8" slot receiver or a 5'10" speed demon. I was looking for 6 foot plus guys, solid receivers, guys who did a little bit of everything with their offenses, right? So that's when I say similar receivers. And I wanted some first round guys and some mid round guys. So I kind of pulled that together to get McMillan, Higgins, and Royals to compare them to Jackson Meeks. So anyway, pass rating when targeting. You can see Meeks better than all of these guys. And by the way, McMillan, Higgins, Royals, these are good football players who had really good passer ratings, NFL passer ratings, over 100, all three of them when targeted at the collegiate level. Jackson Meeks, though, significantly better. He's over 110, right? So again, we're talking about a guy that knows how to bail out his risk quarterback, a guy who doesn't give up interceptions. That's kind of a hidden receiver stat. If it's a poor throw, do you have the ability to break up the pass to make sure it's not intercepted, right? Do you hold down the tough contested catches, which we'll get to in a second, that really jacks up the quarterback's passer rating? That's what Meeks brings to the table. And again, the other three guys here on the screen, they're really, really good football players. McMillan, I think, is going to be a star. I think Higgins has a potential for the Texans. I think Royals will have to wait and see with the Kansas City Chiefs just because they've got so many different things going on there in Kansas City. But these are all good football players. They were all really good at the collegiate level. But Jackson Meeks out of Syracuse, when you look at the data, even better. And that leads us directly into our second chart. Let's go ahead and throw it up on the screen here. We're talking contested catches. I mentioned this a second ago. You can see Tech McMillan with 18, Higgins with 11, Jalen Royals with 8, and then you have Jackson Meeks with 19 contested catches. Folks, that led FBS. I'm going to say that again. Undrafted free agent Jackson Meeks out of Syracuse, now with the Detroit Lions, led the country in contested catches last season. That's who the Lions got as an undrafted free agent, the best on a productivity basis, 50-50 ball winner, contested catch winner in all of college football. Now, if you told me that a receiver was a 1,000-yard receiver, which was Jackson Meeks was, at a high level of football, Syracuse ACC is high level football, and he led the country in contested catches, I would say, all right, he's probably a third-round pick, maybe a fourth-round pick at worst, to fall out of the draft altogether and for the Lions to pick him up and scoop him up as an undrafted free agent. You talk about value, you talk about a great addition. Folks, this is absolutely awesome. Jackson Meeks, we talked about the passer rating a slide ago. Now we're talking contested catches. Great value for the Detroit Lions. But now for my favorite statistic when it comes to this young wide receiver and why it's not just a great value deal for the Lions, but a great fit as well. Let's go ahead and throw this up on the screen, our final chart. Run blocking grade. Jackson Meeks versus similar receivers. You see Ted McMillan, you see Higgins, Royals all around 60. Royals is a little bit less, right around 55. Jackson Meeks 75.5. That was among led the country, was among the leaders in college football last season. Definitely at the top of the ACC, but among the best in college football at large in terms of run blocking grade at the wide receiver position. This is why I think he's a great fit. Obviously, you're going to come to the Lions as an undrafted free agent. You're going to come to the Lions in general. You got to be willing to block. You got to be willing to throw your hat in there. That's what this kid did all the time at Syracuse last year. He was originally recruited to go to Georgia, didn't work out, got buried in the depth chart, goes to Syracuse, and he dominates as a productive receiver, bails out his quarterback all the time, and is also willing to throw his hat in there and be a physical run blocker, and execute at a high level. Guys, this sounds like a Detroit line, right? This sounds like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, a Jared Goff kind of story, the way things are aligning. Now, look, the pads haven't come on yet. We got to see how things shake out over the course of training camp and the preseason. But when you look at the data and you look at the fit, it looks to me personally like the Lions got a massive steal here in undrafted free agent Jackson Meeks. All right, Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this. But first, Lions fans, in the comment section below, we're talking great blockers. We're talking physical football players, but outside the offensive line. So I got a question for you. Who is the greatest blocking wide receiver? Or I'll throw this in a way. Who's the greatest blocker that wasn't an offensive lineman in Detroit Lions history? It'll make you expand your thinking a little bit. Let's think outside the box. Could be a receiver, could be a fullback, or it could be just a tailback. Who knows? Give me the best blocker who is not an offensive lineman or tight end or move tight ends in Detroit Lions history. Really curious what you have to say. This is an interesting question. We usually get a lot of fullbacks to respond here, but maybe there's a great receiver. Let us know in the comment section below. And while you're down there, make sure you sign up for our weekly newsletter courtesy of the Substack platform. 100% free. It doesn't cost you anything. Just a quick link to it. You subscribe. You get a weekly newsletter every Saturday morning. Extra content, articles, data. We highlight the comments of the week. So if you have a great comment, you might see yourself there. So make sure you sign up for it. Again, link in the description box below. 100% free. But enough of that. Mize, over to you now. What are your thoughts on Jackson Meeks and just everything going on with the Lions right now?
Yeah, Nick, this guy looks great. It's like you said, originally you bring up Jackson Meeks to me and we start doing the research on the guy. I had no idea who he was. I really didn't even, think twice about him. But when you start digging into the data on Meeks, this guy looks like a Detroit Lion, like you said. He seems gritty. He seems like he gets the job done. He seems like a really solid fit for this team as well. And I like a couple of things about Meeks. I think some of the stats that you bring up are very fantastic. I love the blocking aspect as well. You love a gritty blocker as a wide receiver. But the one thing that stands out to me is this guy, he played an ACC schedule. Admittedly, Syracuse isn't playing like the top teams in the country, but they played some good teams. And when he went up against the good teams, that's when he really shined. Not saying he did bad in other games, but when they needed him most, this guy really shined. You look at teams like NC State, a tough ACC school, put up 116 yards and a touchdown. You look at the toughest team they played all year in Miami, Florida, last game of the season, guy put up 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. Really great grade for him there, 85 overall grade. Just this guy, when the light is shining, when it's looking like, hey, we need this guy to, show out and do some good stuff for us, he did it, and it didn't matter the competition. He could put on a good performance against some of the best teams in the country when we're talking about the Miami Hurricanes. Really solid team last season for the college football realm. So for him to be able to do that, I think is really, really good. But overall, I think Jackson Meeks, he seems like a fantastic receiver. I think the Lions, they got a lot of great receivers. There's a lot of talent on this roster. But you look at guys like, Tim Patrick. I think, if he needs to spell, if he needs to slot in for someone like that, I think this is an opportunity he could fit in a role like that. You got other guys, though, around the Lions ball. You got Jameson Williams, a great receiver. You got Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's a great receiver, too. But you need a contested catch guy. I think he just fits. Everyone's a little bit different. There's all these guys that are just very interesting for the Lions. But I think Jackson Meeks is a guy who can fit into this lineup very well as far as when he needs to be. He's not going to get, 30, 40 catches in a year, but this is a guy I think early on, he can do some good things. He can do some good work, and he shows when the toughest competition shows up, he's able to do really well as well. So Jackson Meeks really impressed me when we did our deep dive into him, started looking at his stats. Stats you bring up, I think, are really fantastic. So I think this guy's going to shine, whether it's a blocking role, whether, it's a contested catch role, whether they need him to come up big in the red zone at times. He had 7 touchdowns last year. This guy, I think, is going to rise to the occasion. Jackson Meeks looks like a really solid get for the Lions.
Yeah, and anytime we're looking at undrafted free agents and trying to see if there's still potential chance to make the roster and contribute, you always look for 2 things, or at least the way we describe it on this channel, right? It's like, do you have an NFL body? Do you have an NFL athletic skill set, right? It doesn't matter how good of a football player you are. If you're an offensive lineman, you're 5'9", 260, it ain't going to work, right? If you're a running back that runs a 4'9", 40, it ain't going to work, regardless of how skilled you are and other reasons, right? You got to have an NFL athletic frame. You got to have an NFL body. And that's exactly what Jackson Meeks has. 6'2", 200 plus pounds, recruited to the University of Georgia. He's got an NFL body, NFL frame, NFL athletic skill set. So that's the first box to check, right? The second box is, do you do one thing really well? Obviously, you're an undrafted free agent. If you were great at everything, you'd be a first or second round pick. But for an undrafted guy, you got to do at least one thing really well. And you look at Jackson Meeks, and he led the country. He did this extremely well in contested catches. That right there, those two factors say, okay, this guy's a high potential steal. But then you look at his run blocking. Okay, he did two things really well. Then you look at the fact he was a 1,000-yard receiver. And then you look at the fact that his passer rating when targeted is higher than a lot of other quality receivers. And you start piecing all these things together, and you're like, this kid, I mean, look, there's a lot of reasons he fell out of the draft. He's far from a perfect prospect. But when you factor in all these elements here into one equation, you're kind of like, this doesn't feel like an undrafted free agent. He feels like a guy that probably should have been a fifth-round pick, fourth-round pick with his flaws, concerns, and had potential to be a quality player. The fall to the Lions outside of the draft, I think he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. I think his blocking skill set means he's got a great chance to make this roster, whether on special teams or in a backup role, probably special teams to start. But the fact that he's so reliable with his hands, he wins those 50-50 balls. The Lions, if he can continue that during training camp and preseason, of course, they're going to love that. They're going to say, hey, this guy we got to keep around, because if he can develop and if we need some depth, there's nothing you need more in those big postseason moments than reliable hands, a guy that can win the 50-50 balls, great blocker, physical, high-effort guy with a history of production. Remember, 1,000-yard receivers. He can do it all and did it all at the collegiate level. The fact that he was an undrafted free agent still just blows my mind when you break down every element of his game. I think it's pretty clear the Lions got a massive steal here, and he's definitely a guy to focus on over the course of training camp and the preseason. He's going to get a lot of attention for the Detroit Lions.